Here we are at Wolfpack Lawyers, right here in the heart of downtown Nashville, Music Row.
Music Row.
We got Phil Georges here on the show today. Glad to thank you for letting us use your space to do the show.
I'm so glad to have you here.
And
it's
thanks
great.
for the nice drink
absolutely.
that we're going to be sipping on.
We have to hydrate throughout this. We don't become parched. So,
yeah, I've been recording all day. This is good. So let's get right to it, Phil.
Yeah.
You've tried in over 125 cases.
Yes.
You've also resolved thousands more.
Yeah, thousands.
As you look back in your law career, can you look back to a moment where you thought, I made it? Like this is it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that case always stands out in my mind right now. I don't want to say the case name of what it was, but I can tell you a little bit about it. And it's interesting. I think it's different for different people, right? What means like you made it, right? You got some people that are gonna be like, well, I made it because I got some crazy, verdict. For me, it's not my largest case. Now, it was a very good result, I will tell you that. But it really was about the justice of it. And it was a case, it was a medical malpractice case, actually, which we don't really do a lot of. This case was different, though. There's a lot of reasons why I took the case and suspected some issues, with it from the beginning, from the medical records. And man, it was a kid. He was killed in a procedure, and the reason he was killed was due to basically the fact that the doctor, very simply put, the doctor had not done the procedure properly and knew that there was an error. Okay, and when he performed that procedure, he knew an error was done, but then he deliberately did not tell anybody. And I can say this because in the depositions we got him to say that. Okay, literally, it all came out in depositions of what occurred. And had he told nurses and others that, hey, this error occurred, and we better be watching for these symptoms and these issues because it could be fatal, the kid would be alive today. Mm. And as a result of intense, depositions, multiple, and investigation, we learned what it really happened. And this is a unique case because it's normally not like this, And not only that, but, because of the work we did, it not only achieved a result, which was never going to bring that child back for his family, but it changed the policies and procedures of that children's hospital about children that receive that kind of procedure in the future and what kind of recovery floors they have to be on and how that's done. And that's the thing. I mean, that's why I became a lawyer, right? I made it right then because I made a change in society that bettered everyone else going there in that process. Mm. And that's why I do what I do. So, yeah.
So looking at your background, growing up in Chicago and then being a public defender, how has that shaped the way you approach success and leadership?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I mean, growing up in Chicago's key. Chicago's a tough city, It's always been a tough town,
yes.
And my grandfather was a tough man. And my grandfather was, he kind of is a little bit legendary in the city in his own right, worked his way up as an immigrant, fought in World War II and D-Day, the Battle of the Bulge and all that, and eventually become the president of Marion Baking Company, which was the largest bakery in the city. So he knew a lot of people. He had helped a lot of people in time. And so I drew a lot of that strength and that kind of that Chicago attitude, right? That Chicago hardness, of fight, and work really hard, right? Because you're not going to succeed in a city like that unless you have grit. It's the bottom line. And so, yeah, I credit Chicago a great deal, and my grandfather for who I am, forming me, in that way. And then there's just a lot that goes into my background that comes up into it, Public defender taught me a lot of stuff, just about people and their struggle, right? And it's not always black and white.
When you started in law,
yeah,
obviously public defender is not on, I don't think, many people's aspirations list, but where did you really want to go in law?
Politics was the whole thing first. I was working for a congressman in Milwaukee. I was a poli-sci major, and I got to become good friends with this congressman and know him well. And, we're sitting there, and I decide, he's like, one day I'm at his desk. He's like, Phil, what are you doing? What are you going to do with yourself? I'm going into my senior year, in school. And I'm like, I don't know, you know, I'm going to go for my master's degree in public policy. I was, no, you're not. He's like, you want to go into politics, right? At that time I did. I don't anymore. But I'm like, yeah, I do. That's what I want to do. He's like, you're going to go to law school. You know, that's what you're going to do. I'm going to write your recommendation letters. And that's what he did. And that was the first time. So here I am going to my senior year of college. I had never even thought about law school my whole life. Never, didn't even know what it took to become a lawyer. And it was because of the congressman that I said, I looked into it, figured out I had to take this test to go to law school called the LSAM. Like, what's that about? I don't even know. Just signed up for it, you know, went and took it and whatnot. And we applied to law schools, got in, and rest is history. So going to law school was the furthest thing from practicing law, right? It was kind of like a means to an end to this political cycle. But all that changed when I got there, I can tell you that. So.
Yeah. And you said no more politics. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah, you know, I wound up in law school. I wound up running a lot of campaigns. I've ran many campaigns, and I was very active in politics, and I've been a party chairman for a county before, elected to that and stuff. But, you know, politics. You know, I guess I'll put it this way. You know, politics is a strange animal, right? To say the least. And I'm not a big. First of all, I wouldn't want to do it because, you know, for the most part, outside of our current president, it's a career politician pathway to success, and that's not my view of politics. You know, I don't think anybody should go into politics and want to be there more than 8 years. They should get back to then doing life. You know, so and one, I don't want to do that, and two, I've kind of learned that I can do more good outside of politics than in it. Mm-hmm. So.
What do you think? Why do you think politics has turned into the career thing?
I think that it's turned into it because I think that, you know, once people get there, they don't want to let it go, right? It's the power, right? And so there's no check on that power. You know, we talk about checks and balances in our government, which we do have, and you see it working. You really do every day still, despite any people that, you know, have doubt about, well, does it or does it not? I mean, the courts check the legislature checks the executive. I mean, you do see it in play. It really does work. But amongst those that serve, the founders never really contemplated a check and balance, right? Honestly, I think it's because none of them really contemplated themselves who the heck would want to do this for a career, right? And they didn't want to do it for a career. And so that's where term limits come in, right? So because there's no check and balance on that, once you're in it, why would you want to give it up, man? You have all this power. You're being wined and dined constantly. You get these perks. You're important, right? There's ego involved. All of that stuff. Who would want to give that up once you have it, right? Because the only other way you're going to get to that kind of life is if you make it on your own and create a really successful business or enterprise, right? Which is way harder. It's harder to do that than to run for office and win. I can tell you that any day of the week. So,
you know, I used to teach 8th grade American history, and part of that was civics, and we taught a lot about, of course, the Bill of Rights and about the ideas of term limits for the president.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me is there aren't any for anybody else.
Anybody else?
I don't understand that. That always puzzled me. And early in my understanding of that as an adult, it's like, well, okay, what difference? We just don't want a king. All right, we understand that. But we'll have a senator for 50 years.
Right.
Okay, well, I know there's a difference, but what is the difference? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Why would we let someone, I'm not going to name anybody, but why would we let someone serve for 30, 50 years?
Yeah.
And their net worth go from nothing to 180 million on a $180,000 annual salary.
Right.
How does that work?
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And I think that the system's kind of proved that out, right? I mean, that's kind of, you know, one even President Trump's beef about the system, you know, and so, you know, I think that, you know, unfortunately, I think the founders really didn't contemplate it. And again, it was a new experiment, right, for the United States. So, like, we really never had a system in the world before that where people were elected. I don't think they even thought, like, how could someone how could the people ever want to elect somebody that many times, right? I think there's that even thought, you know? And
well, the people are stupid. I think that's what we found out.
Yeah, so they didn't really contemplate that problem. But it's a problem that needs to be addressed because, as we've shown, yeah, you know what? You take a senator and put him in the position for 30, 40 years, regardless of party, right, or anything like that, they have an incredible amount of power, an incredible amount. I mean, basically on that one person's word determines what bills rise and fall and what gets through. And they have that sway. They have that authority.
Yeah.
And I don't want to hear a debate of, oh, well, there's all these other. No, it's not. We know how it really works. We know what really goes down. And I think we would reach a more perfect union if we put in term limits, and for a lot of reasons. One, we'd have that check and balance, right, on those people, so no one person ever abuses it or becomes too powerful. And two, we'd have fresh ideas, because man, we need fresh ideas all the time, right? You need new people coming into government that are from the private sector that can say, hey, you know what? I hear you've been doing it that way for the last 30 years, but let me tell you something. That's not how we do it. We do it this way. And man, we can make things way more efficient. And that just benefits everyone.
So do you have any second thoughts or regrets about not going into politics?
No. I love what I do. I really, really do. One case at a time. I know it seems tedious, right? One case at a time. But it's really worthwhile, and it really does make a difference, especially in individual people's lives. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of access to good people who want to run and do those things. But for the majority, what affects them is in their daily life. And man, for the majority of people, they have no voice. They don't even know where their voice should go. I mean, they don't even know where their voice should go from like day one, like how to deal with a corporation or an insurance company, right? How do they even compete with that? Okay, what they're supposed to say. So even affecting somebody's just daily voice and trying to achieve a little justice for them I just find it very satisfying, and I think I can just do more in the long run, that way, and stuff. And I also, now, and I'm not old by any means. I mean, I'm 46. That's it so far. I got a long way to go, but there's a lot of goals I have. There's a lot of charitable work I want to do in my life, as well. And so, that type of stuff is something that I need to be on the private side to do, to make it happen. And I think I'll leave a greater lasting impression in the long run.
You've been very successful as an attorney, and you have one of the largest successful firms in the country. What would you say has been your key to achieving that type of success?
Oh, hard work, grind. That's it, grind. There's no replacement. You could take intelligence, you could take money or anything like that. You outwork someone, you're going to outwork them. Period. I mean, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. It's always the grind. How do
you define this idea of success? What does that mean to you?
Success is being satisfied with the end result. And I guess it's an individual thing. My end result is what I'm achieving for my clients, right? So I've always looked at it like if I achieve a great result for people, then it's going to turn into a great result for my life, right? And for my family, for the experiences I get to have, right? I don't drive and do what I do so I can take the next big trip, right? Or so I can do the next thing in my personal life, or so I can make the next purchase, right? That's not my motivation, right? I know that if I do the right thing, I do this, it's all going to come to be, so.
So based on that definition of success, do you consider yourself successful?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've helped a lot of people, and that's the best part of it, I've helped a lot of individuals, right? I've never been, and by the way, I've got a ton of friends on the other side who represent corporations and insurance companies. I probably have more friends on that side than I do even on the side that I'm on, you believe it or not, which I think is a testament just to show with how I work with people in a very fair manner. But man, on my side where I'm dealing with individuals always, giving them another chance in life or trying to put their life back together, their broken pieces back together, and then seeing it happen, I think that's really the most satisfying thing. It really is. I mean, I'm really happy for people when we do that. I had a case yesterday. So I just flew back last night, got in at 10:30 p.m. from Richmond. I had a mediation in federal court in Richmond, Virginia. And I had a lady. And let me tell you, I mean, Virginia's a tough state to practice law and for plaintiffs because their laws go back essentially the founding of the country. They're very difficult. It's a lot of procedural hurdles and rules that basically prohibit you from bringing a case, unlike the rest of the country, okay? It's a very, very, very different system of law. And it was a tough case, you know. It was a very tough case. It was a premises case, which are very tough in Virginia. And this lady, though, legitimately got hurt. Legitimately was not her fault. And, you know, we reached a good result. Was it the world for her? No, of course it wasn't. Was it a good result, right? Did it bring justice to her little piece of situation? Was she happy when she walked out of there? Absolutely, you know. Did it take a lot of work to get there? It sure did, you know. And I mean, that's really what it is. Each one of these cases, you know, it's that's what it's really all about, you know. And that's what I appreciate so much about being an attorney, right? Because, man, there's really, other than being a doctor, there's really very few, if no other professions that allow you to have that kind of an impact on someone's individual life.
You know, you went from being a public defender to now owning and running a multi-state law firm.
Yeah.
What mindset shift did it take for you to succeed not only as a public defender but now as a multi-state law firm?
Yeah, a big one, actually. Like one that almost seems like therapy. You know, I mean, because, you know, you start out as a public defender, and that was my choosing. You know, I came out of law school, and I'm like, there's only 2 jobs I want. Prosecutor or public defender. Why? The only 2 jobs that are going to put me in the courtroom every day. And that's all I cared about, right? So once I got into law school, I'm like, man, if I'm going to be a lawyer, man, I better be able to go to court, because that's the kind of lawyer I want to be. And so I picked that, and I'm doing that kind of work. But that's a civil servant job, and you know, you're doing all that stuff. Then I get into and then I'm always working for somebody after that. And so then when I made the shift, which was in 2000, essentially, 2019, really starting to make that decision. I opened this law firm April 11th of 2020. You know, so like about 2.5 weeks after COVID was announced in the United States. So before, I mean, it's 2019, I'm making this mindset shift. That's what you're talking about. Man, it's like going to therapy. You know, it's like, wow, you know, what do I got to do to now take it from a different level, right? Take it from purely just I'm an attorney representing somebody to a business, which are 2 different, very, very 2 different things. It's actually probably the hardest situation for all lawyers to deal with, right? And it's still something I struggle with every day, right? I mean, there's no playbook, unfortunately. Like, I can't go to Barnes and Noble and get a book that says how do you run a law firm. You know, I mean, it's a complicated mess, you know, sometimes. And man, that has been a trying situation, you know, for me. And it's one that I had to make sure I made the mind shift decision that I would commit myself to that. So because it takes a lot more thought and process on that every day, where it takes me away from representing clients, right? I have to rely on people to do that more. And then just on how you put it together, right? That's hard. It's difficult. I have all the respect. Now that I'm a CEO, right, of my company, man, I have all the respect in the world for every CEO that exists, you know, and every small business owner and large business owner, because it's a challenging thing, but it's definitely, you have to have the mindset to do it. And that's one of, you know, that comes with a lot of different facets than just, hey, I'm going to take this case and run it, right? And this is the process. It's a situation where now I'm responsible for people. I'm responsible for their homes. You know, I'm responsible for my clients as well. I'm responsible for the daily operation of the business. And, you know, it definitely took a lot to get there, but I'm there.
Let's take a quick break to thank our amazing sponsors for making this podcast possible.
I finally got it. It's the brand new Relay credit card. So check it out. I'm going to do a little unboxing for you so you can check this out. So here we go. Nice little case. Kind of like the American Express, you know. They're not playing. They're doing it right. Oh, look at this. There's a quote right inside that says, "Success is having to worry about every damn thing in the world except money." Johnny Cash. That's pretty good. I've not heard that one. Oh, this is nice. A little thing on the back. Up to 1.5% cash back. No annual fees or interest. 30-day billing cycle. And there it is. It's the Relay credit card. It's a Visa. So I'm not going to show you my number, but there it is. Look at that. Boom. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/relay.
Thanks for listening to our sponsors. Now, back to the show.
So you you started the firm in 2020.
Yeah.
But the way I met you, the context in which you
Yeah.
and I met, is that we were having a conversation about your firm representing some of the largest vaccine injury cases in the country.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, of course, at that time, the vaccine wasn't, it was murmurs about the vaccine.
It hadn't even come out yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But eventually it came on like a full force. And so what's going on with your firm handling vaccine injury cases just in general?
Sure. So we do handle.
And then COVID.
Yeah, so we do handle vaccine injury cases. That's a really unique subset. You have to be licensed, number one, in the United States Court of Federal Claims, because that court, which is in Washington, D.C., right across the street from the White House. So if you're ever at the White House, right here, there's a red brick building courthouse right here. No one knows it exists. No one ever sees it. They walk by it every day. Okay, it's called the United States Court of Federal Claims. And they have exclusive jurisdiction of all cases in the United States, territories, states, and everything for any vaccine case. And that was established by Congress way back when, that they wanted a unified spot where all vaccine claims went and would be paid out of if they met certain criteria. And there's a lot that goes into that. So that's number one. So we do handle those cases. Number two, then you have the COVID vaccine. That's what you're talking about. And yeah, that hadn't come about yet, and then it comes about. And obviously, it's at this point in time, it's covered under several facets. We can get into a lot of the minutiae on this. So one is it's covered because it's a vaccine-ish. It's actually a countermeasure. So I don't think, and I could go back to, I'd have to research it to be 100% sure, but I still don't think that the COVID, there's no such thing still as a vaccine. It's never been designated vaccine. It's been designated countermeasure, which is a distinction under the law on liability, okay? Number one, because the countermeasures aren't scheduled, right? Only vaccines are scheduled in terms of the types of injuries. So we don't even have a scheduled list of injuries because it's never been designated that, where you could say, hey, if this happened, you could even bring a claim, okay? And then number two, there were a lot of, there was the Department of Health and Human Services under the president, liability acts that were, passed to basically make any company immune if they were doing something in furtherance of trying to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. So for that reason, I've never done any work in the COVID-19 vaccine itself. I'm not it's not something that I stand behind per se. I'm not a doctor. I understand some people want the vaccine, some people don't want the vaccine. That's their own personal belief and preference. Obviously, they got to make a decision like any medical treatment for themselves. However, the COVID vaccine, it was rushed to market, and that's not to say that it's good or bad per se. It's just to say it was rushed to market under a situation, right? The effectiveness of that, I think, there's a lot of questions about it, right? There is a bill that has been presented to Congress at this point. I believe a congressman out of Texas is the one who's put it up. He's got, I think, 21 sponsors at this point to remove any immunity for liability for the COVID vaccine. We'll see if that goes through Congress. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of hoops to get to that.
Yeah.
But it's a question. But anytime you throw something together that quick, it's whether it was even necessary to begin with or whatnot. I mean, who knows? Whether or not that's something that should have even come to be.
Yeah.
But I mean, I understand the impetus. The government's interest was to create something that would placate the population. That's really what it was.
Yeah.
And that's what they did.
So you hold the record for the largest jury verdict in Iowa County, Wisconsin.
Yeah. I love
So
that
what did that case teach you about leadership, resilience, and the human element in law?
You know what? I'll tell you what. That case taught me a lot about resilience, leadership, all of it. So that case was Iowa County. The courthouse is in Dodgeville, Wisconsin. Which is an interesting area. It's very far western, not far from the Mississippi River. So way west in Wisconsin. And what a neat, first off, the oldest courthouse in the state of Wisconsin. A one-room courthouse, by the way, one courtroom in that courthouse. It literally was something like out of a John Grisham novel. I can't even. It literally was. And the judge was a wonderful judge in that case, and he's passed away since. But he was a really neat character. As a matter of fact, he used to be like the mayor of Madison. He was the running mate to Lester Maddox for president, actually, back in the day. Wow. Really all the things that came together in this case were just, it was so crazy. And, and it was a difficult case, right? I mean, it was a case where, you had an insurance company, it was a bad truck-on-truck case. My client's injury was real. Now he didn't have a lot of medical bills. Not a lot. But he had a bad back from it. He's an older man. The big thing is it cost his business. It's really what the case was about, was his business, right? And, insurance company wasn't buying it. They didn't believe it. They didn't like him. There was a lot of patience that had to be involved in it. And patience with my client, because he was kind of an ornery man, and a neat character. And it taught me a lot about just people in the law, because that particular town is it's a small town. It's not like being in a big city. So, there really was no technology in the courtroom. The American flag was flying right outside the window. Everybody on the jury pool knew everybody, literally. I'm not kidding you. It was the craziest thing. I'll never forget, we go to do this voir dire, which is where you select a jury. They bring 40 people in. And they asked, does anybody here on the jury panel, potential jury panel, know another person? Every hand went up.
Yeah, I know him.
Yeah, you couldn't even ask questions, because it was futile to ask questions about, well, who do you know? Well, of course they know. I mean, they literally, it was we could have just held the trial at the barbecue joint across the street. It would have been easier, It was so crazy. And because everybody just knew everybody. That's kind of how the town was. And it taught me a lot about that kind of human nature element, and it changed our strategy, right, in that trial. Our strategy became very human, and I really focused on the human aspect of my client, which he was a salt-of-the-earth kind of guy, truck driver, owner-operator, farmer, cattle rancher, served his country in Vietnam, that kind of thing. That became the whole theme, that this guy's salt of the earth, and he's not going to bullshit you, okay? And if you think he's bullshitting you, then give him nothing, okay? But who is the corporation, That's just the bottom line. And and justly, the jury agreed with us and awarded him all his damages. So.
Wow. The legal landscape's changing a lot, especially with mass tort litigation.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
So, what would you say that entrepreneurs and business leaders need to be prepared for in this new climate?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for business leaders, and something else too. On the flip side, we also do complex business litigation. So we do represent businesses on business disputes they have, usually with other businesses. It's the mass tort litigation side of it is an interesting side of it, because on the one hand, it streamlines this process, which can be good for both sides, actually, and it's proven out to be good both for the business leader owners and for the plaintiffs, depending on the case, right? On the other hand, though, it's also created this really crazy mass situation, which would be bad for both sides, right? Because they don't get their individual, so to say, day in court, right? Whether it be their individual defense or their individual claim. So there's these pros and cons of it. I think that, for business leaders, I think, and entrepreneurs, I think the most important thing is that that they're keeping, that their record keeping is really good. I think that's the most important thing. I think something that's really bit a lot of corporations is kind of these situations where they've had bad record keeping or things kind of tossed around, just in an email and this and that. And that's kind of come back to bite them as to well, why was that said, or why was that done, or why was that not documented, right? Whether they're creating a new product, or what are their specs for that product and stuff. So making sure that they're managing that, and that it's almost like everything that they do is really put in a binder and really kept to be shown. These were the reasons why and how we got to that process. That's probably the best advice I could give them. And I'm coming from the other side, because that's going to show that, hey, look, we were doing this for this reason, right? Not because it was fortuitous or we were disregarding this, because a lot of times, a lot of these types of cases are, hey, we knew that there was this problem, we were disregarding that, right? We were going to put people at risk knowingly, and that happens. That happens all the time. But if that's not the reason for it, right? And I'm not. There are bad actors out there. Don't forget that there are bad actors out there, and that's going to come up, and that's going to come to fruition. But there's also a lot of people that are just, hey, they're just trying to do the right next thing. They think this is the best process or best practice, but they didn't know it really wasn't at that moment. Then just documenting that's going to show, hey, look, I was really just trying to do the right thing, but it just didn't happen that way. And that changes, right? That changes the dynamic of it, So,
has there been maybe a controversial strategy or tactic that you use legally that others questioned at the time, but ultimately turned out to be the right thing for your client?
Interesting. Yeah. So, was it controversial at the time of the tactic? I've never done anything like that was unethical, right, in the process, right? So never had somebody talk to me that shouldn't talk to me or anything like that. I never would, actually. Trying to think if there was something that was kind of like, I would say, more so cutting edge that turned out to be the right thing. And, I guess I'll say this. I mean, you're going to laugh. You're going to laugh right now, okay, at this. So it's more of a technique than it is a strategy, more than it is like, oh, I've got some magic tool in my toolbox. So I got to know kind of well F. Lee Bailey. Okay?
Really?
Yeah, I know. As I see you laugh.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
And I really, really liked him a lot. I mean, when I say a lot. And he loved my wife probably more. She loved meeting with him, and as he got older, like helping him out, and stuff. Because when he got old, I mean, he was an old man, so you had to help him bring him some food, things like that. We'd see him every year. I got to talking to him, and on one particular occasion, I got to talk to him quite a bit. And we were talking about some cases I had and just strategy. And he told me his strategy, and he always said, he loved the law, but he loved cross-examining people. And there's a rule in the law, and you've heard this in movies, like never ask a question you don't know the answer to. Not F. Lee Bailey. Go with your gut and ask that question and listen and push that answer that you don't know the question to. It's kind of what he would do, and that's what he advised me, and that's what I've done. And I've won actually many trials doing that at the end of in the middle of that case in front of a jury, asking those questions that, what, I'll be quite frank, I don't really know the answer to. My gut tells me where it's going, but I don't know where it's going, but I'm going to make a show of it. And yeah, it panned out. It panned out. And that takes a lot of guts, right? Because if it goes sideways, you lose your case. And that's there aren't a lot of lawyers, I'll tell you, who do that. I mean, they teach you not to do that.
Yeah.
So that just comes from what you're feeling at that moment, and never be afraid to show the jury who you truly are in terms of your passion for your client. I've had, I've been known in the courtroom to be kind of a little bit outlandish sometimes, and I'll make a scene, and stuff, and show the jury what's really going on, and and not because I'm trying to grandstand for myself, because I'm just trying to, register some sort of emotion about what's really happened. Because, gosh, no, the jurors don't want to be there, and I get it. They want to be at home or at work, And so that's another thing too. Not all lawyers necessarily do that. So, and again, it's not. I guess it's controversial a little bit. It's nothing illegal or unethical about it.
Right. I know there's definitely a difference. But what is the difference between what we see in television courtroom scenes versus what actually goes on in real court?
Yeah, totally. I mean, number one, everything goes wrong in the trial, right? I mean, so, in the TV, like, things play out, and it's like there's like a build-up, right? And then there's the Matlock moment, like, right? And I've had those moments, but I tell you, it didn't get there because there was a build-up. I mean, it got there kind of like from this, like ping pong action going back and forth that was kind of crazy. That's the biggest thing, is that in the military, right? Murphy's Law, right? It's always going to present itself. There's always a snafu, right? Situations normal, always fucked up, right? I mean, that's what always goes down every mission. That's what goes down every trial, right? You got a witness who's going to go sideways on you. This evidence is going to get excluded by a judge. You're like, you got to be kidding me. That should come in. It shouldn't. So you're always having to constantly adapt to these issues, constantly on the fly, right? And that's what they don't show you on TV, right? Because on TV it looks very, very much systematic and orchestrated, this and that, and that's just not the reality, right? Because how that evidence is going to come in never comes in the way you exactly want it, and so if you're not able to adapt to it quickly, you're never going to get to that moment, where you're trying to show the jury what you're trying to prove and stuff. So that's the biggest, the biggest thing, And two is, I think the other thing too is that it's just not always that clear cut. I mean, I feel like on TV, when they get to the time, it's time to go to verdict with that jury. Wow, everyone watching that movie like really feels like, oh, this is what should happen, And the truth is, when you're in trials, you get to that time and it goes back to the jury, and I think we all feel this way, and that is, we have no idea what's going to happen, And I think everybody would tell you that in the law generally. Prosecutors, defense attorneys, plaintiffs' lawyers, defense attorneys. I think we all feel that way most of the time. Like, we're still uncertain, which is the struggle, I think, for a lot of jurors, because I think when they go back to that jury room, I've talked to jurors afterwards, it isn't that easy in that jury room. Rarely do they get in there and are like, boop, that's the decision. Let's get back out there. So
it's like 12 Angry Men.
Oh yeah, that's a great movie.
That's a great movie.
Wow. I really wonder how many young lawyers have actually ever seen that movie. I bet you they haven't. They should all watch it. That's a great movie.
Let's take a quick break to thank our amazing sponsors for making this podcast possible.
As an entrepreneur running multiple businesses, effective communication is critical for me. I've tried all kinds of outreach tools over the years, but none have compared to Dubb when it comes to driving real results, and that's DUBB. I was one of Dubb's first users. I think it was like 7 years ago when they first launched, and I've been a loyal customer ever since. Dubb has completely transformed my prospecting, my client communication strategy, and here's why. Dubb makes it simple to record personal video messages and share them across email, SMS, social media, and more. And this brings back the face-to-face connection that's missing from most digital outreach. And what happens is my prospects instantly feel more engaged when they can put my face to my name. I end up building a stronger relationship faster by incorporating these video messaging into my workflow. Dubb also provides tracking and analytics so I can see exactly who engages with my videos and how they respond to them. Their automation and their CRM features help me nurture leads and close more deals. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, right, as entrepreneurs. So after using Dubb for years, I absolutely can't recommend them enough. I mean, Ruben, those guys over there are phenomenal. I love Darius. They're all great guys. It's become an invaluable tool that I depend upon to run my businesses efficiently. And if you want to boost your outreach and see amazing results like I have, head over to therealjasonduncan.com/Dubb. That's DUBB, and you can try it completely for free. No credit card required. You get the first 50% off your first 2 months, by the way, if you use my link. You need to take your prospecting to the next level with video messaging from Dubb. They're my go-to sales communication platform for nearly 7 years and counting. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/Dubb. Try it for free, no credit card required, and you'll get 50% off your first 2 months as well.
Thanks for listening to our sponsors. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, I was made to watch that in college, and I didn't go to law school.
Yeah.
I don't even remember why. Maybe it was a conflict resolution class.
Yeah.
But it was a great movie. Of course, there's the original movie, and then there's the more modern one that probably came out in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
But they're both fantastic movies, and I think everybody should watch it.
Absolutely.
Has there been a verdict that you went into as the attorney representing the plaintiff?
Yeah.
And you're like, we've lost. Like this, I'm going to lose. And then it came back and actually won.
Absolutely. And it wasn't even on a big case. I mean, I'll tell you right now. So this is so silly, right? It was a case we had. It was a car wreck case, $6,000 in medical bills. Okay, we tried this case. So this is nothing, earth-shattering or life-changing. And I'm like, we lost this case, hands down. I mean, the evidence went in all wrong. My doctor, and it wasn't my doctor, I should say. It was the doctor who I called as a witness, but it was the treating doctor. Horrible testimony. I mean, that testimony couldn't have gotten any worse. I mean, it was brutal for me. I'm like, man, this is terrible, terrible. And they were asking for a 0 verdict. They were asking for contribution, right? In terms of that's how you have comparative fault, right? So the jury weighs the liability of the one party versus the other, kind of like on a scale, and then assigns a percentage. In order to win, you got to get, in Tennessee, you have to have 51% or more to win that case, right? Oh, I'm like, man, liability is horrible. Okay, the doctor was bad. I mean, really, really bad. And I'm like, and so when we closed out that case, I'm like, this is a 0 verdict. And jury comes back, 100% against the defendant, $6,000 in medical bills, $30,000 in pain and suffering, and go home. And I was just like, no way, like, we won.
You're like, of course I knew this was going to happen.
And even the judge pulls me into the chambers afterwards, and he was a great judge. He was somebody I'd see, oftentimes. He literally goes to me, he goes, you got so lucky. That's what he said. You got so lucky.
Well, you got to win them when you can take them.
Yeah, that's right. So it was great.
So imagine you're mentoring a fresh attorney right out of law school.
Yeah.
And they're talented, but they're overwhelmed, and you're sitting them down saying, okay, this is what you got to do to be successful in law. What would you say?
So number one, you got to have a work ethic and work hard, and you got to love the law like your mistress. I mean, look, the law is my mistress. This business is mine. I mean, I mean, it takes up my life, my time. If you aren't going to give it to that, then you're not going to be successful. The biggest problem I see day in and day out with young lawyers and just with young people today is they don't want to put in the time. They don't want to put in the work. They think everything's a 9 to 5. And, I've never bought into that, there's no work-life balance for me. I could give a rat's ass. It's about work, and play and live a great life and live it hard. I'm going to die. I'll have all the time to sleep then, and that's the thing that we're missing today. And a lot of people. And you gotta, if you're gonna be successful at anything, but in the law especially, you gotta really willing to put in that work, that extra time. And that extra time can't be during the day when you're dealing with clients, because you gotta deal with the clients, right? And they deserve to have their phone calls taken, and you gotta deal with issues. It means you gotta do it at night, right? You gotta learn the law at night. The law is, you can't just rely, on, AI to tell you what the answer is, which is another thing that all these young people are doing, right? ChatGPT or Lexis AI. We have all kinds of AI platforms now for everything. And there's a place for it, by the way. Truly, I mean, it's a tool, okay? It's a great, beautiful, instead of like a hand drill, it's a great power drill. That's the analogy I give AI, right? So back in the day, we used to have hand drills and all that. Then we got drills with power cords, and we got cordless drills. I mean, that's what AI is. That's that cordless drill with all the adaptive tools. That's what's come out now, right, of information. But it still isn't going to build a house for you, right? Okay, it's still not going to solve your case for you unless you put in the work, right, and reading the cases and knowing what the law is. Because if you still can't identify what the problem is from talking to a human being, then you'll never know what to feed that machine, okay? And the only way you get there is because you've read enough cases, you've read enough statutes, you've read enough decisions, you've read enough articles to keep it in your memory bank to know when I see that someday, that's what it was, okay? And I remember I read that. This is that situation. This is how we should tackle it.
So. Coffee or tea?
Oh, coffee. Addicted.
All right.
Addicted.
Courtroom case you're most proud of?
And, it's so funny you ask that. because there's been so many. And, there's the Iowa County case is one of the ones the most, there's two, actually. The Iowa County case one was one because the defense tried to discredit a man who deserved all the credit in the world. And I'll tell you this reason why, this story. And the other case was similar to that. I'm going to stick with the Iowa County one, though, because they're similar cases, but it had to do with trying to discredit my client. So he had done a lot of things in Vietnam, and he worked in covert operations, and these guys, the insurance companies, sometimes the defense, if they can't get their hands on the documentation, it's like, well, how do we know that really existed? Well, last time I looked, make a request to the CIA and see what kind of answer you get. Okay, you're going to get a zero answer, all right, unless the president wants to declassify it. And this guy, I had sat with him and his family so many times. I knew he was the real deal, right? And I knew something else that they didn't know. I'm going to tell you the story because you're going to appreciate this. So they're trying to actually discredit his service to the jury, which was really pathetic and really sad, because he was there and he did do the things he did, and I didn't make it a focal point because I didn't feel like it was a relevant focal point of my case, right? I'm not gonna. I wanted the jury to focus on my guy's business loss and what really happened, but the defense wanted to go that way. So I get up on redirect, and I asked the judge, I said, Your Honor, I said, may I have the client come out of the witness box and come down in front of the jury with me? He's like, okay, I'll allow that. I said, Your Honor, I need him to take off his shirt. And the judge is a little bit, I'm like, trust me, Your Honor, I'm going to connect all these dots, okay? Just let me do this. I know this is a strange request. And he's like, okay, I'll let you do it, but this better move, move along what's going on here. And so he takes off his shirt in front of the jury, so he's shirtless. And I said, Mr. His name, sir, I said, would you go over with the jury what all the scars are on your body? And he went through and he's like, well, this is where I was shot in Cambodia. This is from the knife fight with this person, and this was from this, and all of his wounds and stuff through his body while he was over there serving the United States. And that was it. I knew at that point we had won that case, because you try to discredit a man who literally almost sacrificed everything for us, and that was really a pathetic move. So I was very proud of that. Very proud of that moment. That was kind of a Matlock moment.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If you weren't a lawyer, what would you be doing?
Well, okay. So I got a couple probably one of my two passions then and stuff, and my two biggest hobbies. So if I wasn't a lawyer, I'd probably have a dive shop on some little Caribbean island in the Caribbean, taking people diving.
Love it.
Love scuba diving. And if I wasn't a lawyer, I'd probably have a really cool restaurant as a chef, because I love to cook.
All right. Favorite motorcycle route you've ever ridden?
Wow. A favorite motorcycle route I've ever ridden. There's a pass, I don't know what the road is, but if you're up near St. Paul, Minnesota, and you ride the Mississippi down on the Wisconsin side all the way down to Mineral Point, that route, which goes along the Mississippi, is incredible and gorgeous. I don't even know if most people ride it or not, but I'd say it's one of my favorite. It's so beautiful, and it's so amazing.
Yeah, I've never ridden up there.
Yeah.
Never been up there. But I know you're involved in Harley Owners Group, and you're involved in leadership in the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
How has giving back to your community affected your leadership skills?
Great deal. I mean, I think that it's critical. It's taught me a lot, right? I mean, first of all, when you're working with kids, it teaches you patience. I mean, boy, let me tell you, herding cats all day, from the time they were Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts, you know what I mean? All that stuff, and I've held almost every position in both levels. It's tough. It's tough. It teaches you a lot of patience, a lot. And that gives you great skills, right, in life. You got to be patient with employees. You got to be patient with a lot of things. So giving back in that way has been important. But that's really what I want, to do. I have all these goals, I guess because I know I have vision, right, which is what a lot of people lack, right? So I have vision to do things to be successful. I want to take it to that next element someday to have that vision to do things for people, as a whole, right? So I want to raise money and create a foundation eventually. And my kids are almost done with, almost an empty nester. So when my kids are done with school, especially because I got to get mine all done and out, I want to create a foundation. And I have really two big passions. One is heart research, because my youngest boy had a congenital cardiac problem where he had open heart surgery at 8. And the other is dealing with kids that have learning differences. And learning differences are really underlooked. And learning differences can encompass a lot of things. But there's so many kids that have, I'm going to call them moderate to slight learning differences, from ADHD and attentive type and other types, to cases where they're not on the spectrum for something, right? And there are so many people that fall into this category, but they're not eligible for any help, right? Because they're not on the spectrum, so they're not going to get special assistance or special needs. And yet and they have no place to go, right? So they fail, right? They're considered the failures in our public school system, because our public schools have no capacity to really help these kids, is generally what it is. And so I really want to raise as a foundation as much money as possible to be able to send these kids to the right programs and the right mentors and the right tutors, because all they need is that little extra support, that little extra help. Because for a lot of them, they're going to grow into those processes and become successful, great adults. And they just need someone that can help them there. And the families can't afford it, right? It's very difficult. So, I think that by having been involved in so many things, and I've been on a board of directors for the Medical College of Wisconsin Cardiovascular Center before, and I've served in other capacities. I've seen these issues, right? And someone's got to help them, right? And unfortunately, there's only so many of us that can, right? It's really a few that create those foundations to do those things, right? And like Bill Gates, I know he's devoted his life to doing that, and I commend him for that. And so that's something that I want to be a part of too, because that's really what it's all about, is at the end of the day, it's to be a better friend, a better person, and to be known to have been someone who was good to others in life. Like, that's my life goal, right? When I die someday, that's what I want to be known for, not being necessarily the most badass trial lawyer or the most badass anything, right? And if it all brings, that's what it's about, so.
Well, I've got one more question for you, but before we do that, I want to let everybody know they can find you at wolfpacklawyers.com.
That's right.
Or at wolfpacklawyers on Instagram. If you are anywhere in the United States and need help with trial, business litigation, vaccine injury, medical malpractice, anything else that they would want to reach out to you for specifically?
Yeah, just really mostly civil-related type of stuff. But we just said is key. If they've been injured, or they have, if they've been injured by something, right, that's, and it could be an injury, an accident, complex thing, a product, or, like I said, complex business litigation. I'm not going to help you start your corporation. I have no interest in doing paperwork, right, on that. But you've got a valid dispute, right? And you're being sued, or you need to sue somebody, and this contract's been breached, something's gone bad, shit's hit the fan. Yeah, definitely call me on that.
Wolfpacklawyers.com. All right, so last question for you, Phil Georges. We're talking with Phil Georges today. What's your best piece of advice for an entrepreneur based on all of your experience?
My best piece of advice is, check the fear at the door. And don't be afraid.
It's a great way to leave it. Thanks for being on the show. It's been an honor.
This has been great.
Thank
really
you,
great.
Thanks,
buddy.
Attention business owners. Attention business owners. Feeling burnout from running your business? Uncertain if you're nearing burnout? Take our free 10-question business burnout test at businessburnouttest.com to discover where you stand. With just 10 quick questions, you'll learn how to immediately begin making changes to regain freedom and success. Cut your daily operations time in half. Improve your quality of life and prepare your business for your future exit without losing revenue or profit. Visit businessburnouttest.com now and take the test. Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.